Hi everyone, I'm Jackie, and you all know Jason, and today I'm asking him 5 more questions on the Packers. We've heard a lot of the coaches and the players talk about they need to do better on their third down conversions. What do you think is the reason for their lack of third down conversions?
Well, I think anytime you have an issue, you have to focus on the reasons why it's happening. For example, 5 questions with intern Jackie. There were questions about how I was lording over you, so now we've changed up the seating arrangement. I'm much lower, a little more eye contact. In terms of the third down conversion situation, though, when you look at what the Packers have had, it's been different problems, and Mike McCarthy said it today. If there was one thing that they could clearly see was the issue, they would fix it. But Aaron Rodgers hasn't played well enough on third down. After last year, he was the best third down quarterback in the league. They've had penalties, they've had sacks and negative plays, they've had interceptions, they've had guys run poor routes, they've had drops. It's really been symptomatic of their entire offense that there are all kinds of different little problems, and when you add them all up, it creates an offense that's been dysfunctional and out of sync.
We've seen Aaron Rodgers hit the ground quite a few times in the last couple games. And last year, the offensive line, towards the end of the season, seemed to do a pretty good job of keeping him upright. What's the difference? What's the big change there?
Well, he had 3 sacks against him just by Cameron Wake alone last week. He had a total of 5 sacks. I don't know if the protection has been appreciably better or worse. I think it's been worse than it was during the second half of last season, but I don't think it's risen to the level that they had the problems in the first 8 games of last year. You know, they're playing with Brian Bulaga at right tackle. They've had injury problems with both their veteran tackles, and I talked to one GM in the league before the season, and all he kept saying was their offense is going to go as Mark Tauscher and Chad Clifton go, and whether they stay healthy or not. And you know, they haven't stayed healthy. I don't think their health has been the greatest issue causing the offensive problems, but you know, Tauscher looks like he's not going to go again this week, and that would be 3 games in a row. And you know, Brian Bulaga, while there's a lot of confidence in him, he is still a rookie, and there aren't going to be those bumps in the road.
And the Packers are getting back 2 key players this week, Bigby and Harris. Should the defense see an immediate impact?
Well, they still have issues health-wise in other positions, obviously, and even guys like Cullen Jenkins, who has been playing but is playing with a cast on his hand. You saw how that impacted whether or not he could wrap guys up. It's cost him a few sacks. You know, they should, or they feel like they're going to, get Clay Matthews back, but I do think that if they have Al Harris and Atari Bigby added to Charles Woodson, Tramon Williams, who's playing fantastically, and Nick Collins, who's a Pro Bowl safety. Now, I asked Tramon Williams this question today, is that the best secondary in the league? And of course he said yes. I don't know if it is or isn't, but I certainly think it's in the discussion. And Charles Woodson hasn't played particularly well, but Tramon Williams has been fantastic. And to understand just how well he's played, I don't think it's a slam dunk by any means that Al Harris comes back and is the clear-cut starter. I think there's a good chance. And Al said he didn't know what his role was going to be this week, but I think there's a good chance that he ends up being a guy who comes in the nickel. Now, they play a ton of nickel snaps. In fact, there's been games where they played nothing but nickel. So that still means that Al Harris would play a lot, but you know, given the choice between Al Harris and where Sam Shields is at currently, I think Sam Shields has potential, but you're talking about an undrafted rookie free agent versus a 2-time Pro Bowler who's played this game for going on 15 years.
All right, and some big talk in the NFL this week. They're deciding to suspend players for violent hits. Do you think this policy is good or bad? Keeping in mind there's players like James Harrison from the Steelers who has stated his objective is to hurt players.
Well, and he's retiring now. I don't know if you heard, that was his threat, is that he's going to retire because he just can't play this game the way the rules are going. I think it was Carlos Dansby in Miami who said by 2012 we're going to be going 5 Mississippi before we can chase the quarterback. And I understand that they are frustrated as defensive players, but you look at what James Harrison did over the weekend and a few of the other hits that were pretty clear. I mean, the suspensions, it's one thing to be suspended, it's another thing to be fined, and I don't think the fines are effective in terms of legislating those kinds of hits out of the league. I think you can be hard-hitting without being illegal, and I just think that the NFL sees the cumulative effect of concussions. They made that an emphasis. They certainly see the potential of really serious injuries here, and one thing about Commissioner Roger Goodell, he has always responded to public response, and I think in this instance he sees that while fans may like the oohs and the ahs of the big hits, there are some players in real danger.
All right, and finally, Packers-Vikings, Sunday night, big game. Two teams who were supposed to be big powerhouse offenses but seem to be struggling a bit. How do you think that matchup is going to turn out?
Well, what I think is interesting is that, and Aaron Rodgers actually mentioned this during his conference call with the Minnesota reporters, you know, it's Brett Favre, it's Packers-Vikings, it's Randy Moss back with the Vikings, all these storylines which are there and we'll all write about, but both of these teams are disappointing right now. One's 2-3, one's 3-3, and they both need this win. And it seems to be more, like Aaron said, about each team getting back on track than it is about the individuals involved. And you know, Mike McCarthy talked about how you worry about your own house or your own farm, which I never heard the farm line before, but they clearly need to do that. And yes, we're all going to write our Brett Favre stories and we're all going to write our Randy Moss stories, but the reality is that these are two teams that I think a lot of people thought would be maybe 5-1 and 4-1 because the Vikings had a bye, and that's just not the case. I think this is a really important game between two teams that still have plenty of season left and plenty of opportunity to aspire to be a good playoff team and a Super Bowl team, but they've got to get on track. And the Packers, with their injury problems, that's another big hurdle that they have to get over. So it's a big game. I'm anxious to see how it plays out on Sunday night, but you know, I think Favre-a-palooza or Favre-ageddon or all the other things we called it last year, it's not quite the same vibe this time around.
All right, thank you. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.